Yeah.
Hey, we're live.
Oh, vegan gays as well. She's there.
Yeah. So we're
good.
just saying good old Terry. You were just saying.
Oh, well, so good,
So
good young Terry. He's not. I mean, I can't. I've got no right to call anyone old, have I? Really? Everyone's young. Even you.
Yeah.
You're young, Roger. Young Roger. Just a whippersnapper.
Yeah, that's me. All right, that's me. Right. So, folks, and welcome everybody there already. Michael seemed to be first. Terry, Michael again. Laura, that's me. Deb, and Vegan Gaze. Hi, how you doing?
Yeah, hi everyone. Let's hope a few more join. I mean, obviously this is going to be available afterwards for people to watch. So
Ronnie, you contacted me a few days ago and said, should we do an end of year? What the heck happened with 2020? Because obviously there's a kind of official narrative, and one of the interesting things from a vegan point of view, for me at least, and it's going to come up later, if not right now, is this issue of getting back to normal. And it's amazed me that right from the start of the pandemic, people were talking about getting back to normal, and I was thinking, hang on a second, right? And so we'll talk about that. So we've got a clip, a film clip, but we've also got a PowerPoint which I'm going to introduce, and essentially we'll just go through those slides, Ronnie, and you can we can just talk about that, and hopefully people in the chat will do the same. So let me bring that up. There we go. Voila.
Okay.
So you should see that now in full screen, hopefully. So we've called it The Good, the Bad, and the Bloody Awful. And it's funny, really, because Ronnie and I came up with the same title, but separately, which was interesting.
Yeah, there we are. Great minds, as they say.
Yeah, or something like that. I see on the screen that it's not. It's a bit cut off. So let's go to the first one.
Yeah.
And see how it goes. So
that's
yeah, we're going to start off with some sad news, really.
Yeah, we're going to start off with the bad, or really the sad, and that is a number of very good activists sadly passed away this year, and that's Jim Buckner. Jim was a great guy. He died. He was age 86. He died in March. He died from COVID, and he and his wife Lillian, who died the previous year, were a force to be reckoned with in the animal rights movement in the UK. They campaigned on lots of issues. When the main thing was against live exports. Was some people might regard as a kind of welfareist thing, but they was pushed veganism as part of that. And Jim was involved in an attempt to rescue Rocky the dolphin from captivity way back in the 1980s. And one of the people that was involved with him was Barry Horn, who lost his life on hunger strike. 2002, I think Barry died, and Jim was involved in that. They were sadly they're unsuccessful. They were arrested, and Jim, I think, ended up getting a suspended sentence. So he was kind of he was a kind of ALF activist as well.
It was a long term, because Barry was on that, yeah, but Mel Broughton was on that, wasn't
Mel Broughton as well, yeah. So Jim was a great guy. There he is with his granddaughters. He's got he came from the USA, and he's got family in the USA, and he's got granddaughters in the USA. And after Lillian died, he went over to the USA to see his family, and there is a picture of him with his granddaughters when he visited them over there. So that was a sad loss, and that was COVID. And really, although Jim, I think, was obviously very badly affected by Lillian's death, I think he would have gone on. He would have gone on for longer, had it not been for the virus.
Yeah. Did Jim's kind of story highlight that movement issue about whether we need to create vegans, or whether we need to create activists who then become vegan, or do you know, as it were, in which order that happened for him? Do you know?
I think I think it was Lillian that got him into that kind of got him into the vegan thing and the activist thing. I don't really know which came first with him, whether he became vegan first or whether he became an activist first. But veganism was something that he kind of always promoted. I mean the live export movement actually did kind of create a lot of vegans, because a lot of non-vegans were involved in it, protesting at the ports, and they rubbed shoulders with vegans, and so the non-vegans became veganized. And I mean, for instance, that's how Kevin White, who's organised all those great vegan festivals, he got involved. He became vegan through the live exports movement.
So Kevin was down doing the live exports as a non-vegan at first, then, yeah.
I believe that was the case. Yeah, I think that's how he came to veganism.
Wow,
so that's another example of that kind of thing happened. And the next slide, and this is on the left here. That's Eileen Clark. She's this was back in, I think, 2016, protest in London. I think against wild animals in captivity, and there she is with the actress Virginia McKenna. Eileen, I knew Eileen from way back. I used to speak to her on the phone every few months. She was still involved in sort of campaigning locally. She lived in Walthamstow in East London, and another victim of COVID. She was in her 80s. She had heart problems and died in hospital from COVID. But once again, she'd have gone on. She was involved in rescuing feral cats and that kind of thing. So once again, a long-term campaigner and another very sad loss to the movement.
Yes, indeed. And for people who don't know about Virginia McKenna, she made a name on Born Free, which was a true story about what, Joy Adamson, is that right? Joy Adamson?
I think it was. And I think she was I think she was then involved in the Born Free Foundation.
And Zoo Check maybe as well. There was one called. There was a group called Zoo Check, wasn't there?
Yeah, I think that may have been, may have been connected. I mean, that kind of goes way back. But Eileen was still campaigning just as recently out there as 2016, and she's sadly not with us now.
Yeah, so that's 2 COVID victims already.
Two COVID, and here's a third COVID victim, sadly, in May. On the right there's Dave Huff. I remember Dave when my early days in Hunt Sabs spent, and that was Sue on the left, his ex-wife, and they lived in Oxfordshire back in the day. And I spent many days round at their house. They had Hunt Sab meetings around there. The few of us used to go around. We'd go out sabbing. Dave was involved in ALF stuff. He served a prison sentence, and very very involved in various mainly anti-hunt stuff.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because again, we do have this issue in our movement that not a lot of people know much about the history and the people that went before, and we do seem to have this generational divide now, which is a bit interesting in the sense that some people kind of think the movement is kind of 10 years old or something. And of course, we show for the first 3 slides that that's not the case. People have been doing stuff for many, many years, and
long time. David was in his 90s. He died he died in a care home. Of course, COVID hit the care homes really badly. They weren't given proper protection, and once again, he could have gone on for a few more years. David, it's very, very sad to hear about his death.
Yeah, it's another issue, isn't it, for the movement? Come on in, Rouge. I'm getting pestered by Rouge here. Come on in.
Normally I get pestered by cats, but they're not in here at the moment.
Yeah, it's another movement issue, isn't it? Care homes for vegans. So
I think there is an organisation that kind of certainly lists care homes that vegans or vegetarians can go to. And that's really important because, of course, you're kind of you're sort of at their mercy, aren't you? If you're in a care home, you haven't got family to kind of that share your views and are on the case, then they're going to end up feeding you anything, aren't they? And you're not going to be able to really do anything. And so yeah, it's
it's a bad thing, really, isn't it? Yeah.
It's a human rights issue, isn't it, as well as animal rights. That's John Bryan. John. Oh, I knew John way back in the 70s. John, once again, a long-term campaign for animal rights. He was on the RSPCA council, the RSPCA board at one time. He was he worked for the League Against Cruel Sports. He did lots of stuff to do with protecting wildlife. He was a hunt sab at one time. My fondest memory of John was myself and a friend way back in the days of the Band of Mercy, which was the precursor to the ALF. We rescued some guinea pigs from a place in the middle of the night, and it was like a kind of we hadn't intended to. We'd intended to go to this place and cause damage, and their van wasn't there for some reason, so we got in and rescued these baby guinea pigs. And then we thought, what are we going to do with these guinea pigs? And we were not far from where John lived, which was kind of we were near Salisbury, I think, where this took place. John lived down that way, so we sort of phoned him up in the early hours of the morning. John, we got these guinea pigs, and he said, "Oh, bring them down round. I'll have them." And so we were on the way to John's. We got stopped by the police. And we had the guinea pigs up our jumpers, and they searched the car. And we were camping, and then kind of pitching camp, going and doing a raid, and then going to the next place. So we had camping equipment in the car, and we said, "Oh, we've been camping and the stuff." So they looked in the car, and they said, "All right, on your way." And they, his guinea pigs didn't move around too much, and we took them to.
You'll carry on talking, Ronnie. I've got a cat.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I'll talk about guinea pigs. You sort out the cat. So John took these guinea pigs were blind. I think they'd been bred to be blind to do with experiments, and John took them in, and he looked after them for the rest of their lives, and that was kind of one of the early successes of the Band of Mercy / Animal Liberation Front, because as a result of that raid, the people who ran the place closed it down. They were so frightened that these these sort of animal liberation people knew about them that they closed down the business. So just taking those guinea pigs had big repercussions. And John, that's kind of probably my fondest memory of John, that he was prepared to immediately.
That was the same, wasn't it? With wasn't that the same with the first thing with the seal things in the wash? Didn't they stop that as well? Because they were
when we a couple of us went and we destroyed one boat that was used for seal hunting. We badly damaged the other, and as a result of that, it kind of never happened again. Every year, I think every June, there was this slaughter of baby seals up on the Wash in Lincolnshire, and it was local. These local kind of fishermen would kind of they were involved in it. It was like an extra income for them, and they'd go out in these sort of small fishing boats and then launch inflatable dinghies from the fishing boats, go on the sandbanks, shoot the baby seals, get their skins, sell the skins. And there were protests. So, there'd been protests going on for several years. Hunt Sabs had tried to disrupt it. And then the year we attacked the boats, it got called off. The government refused to give them a license, so it had to be licensed. And it's never happened since. And I think it's probably that just kind of what we did was probably like the final straw in terms of the aggro that was surrounding this killing the seals. And so they decided, right, we're not going to allow it anymore.
Controversial in the first place. One thing, again, for people interested in the history of the movement, this is John's book. I hope you can see that. I can't see my screen until I see it on this one. This is Fettered Kingdoms from 1982, and it's a really interesting book. It's got some great chapters in it. One about angling, which I suppose in 1982 was quite advanced, and he's got a little line. He says there are 3 prerequisites for angling: a hook, a line, and a stinker.
Yes, that's very, very good. I did have my disagreements with John. I mean, he was kind of very critical of the ALF or certain ALF actions. I think, actions that cause damage, and I think maybe infected kingdoms, that's mentioned. So I didn't always agree with John, but I think that, I very much respect, his lifetime devoted to.
He went on to work for the League Against Cruel Sports, didn't he? And then became a wildlife free living being consultant, I think. He was towards the end. Actually, another technical thing about John Bryant, probably the worst thing about John Bryant, is he's responsible, instrumental even, in bringing Gary Francione into the movement, because Francione sought him out on the back of the publication of Fetid Kingdoms, and so come on then, Rouge.
No, I wasn't aware of that at all. But yes, it's and he ran a rescue centre for some years down in Somerset as well. So Johnny was involved in all sorts of stuff. His whole life, really, from I don't know how young, from really quite a young age, devoted to to campaigning for animals.
And John's situation wasn't that one wasn't related to COVID, is that right, Ronnie? Or do you know?
No, that he had bone cancer.
Oh wow!
Okay. Yeah. He was 77, I think. And this is something really sad happened earlier this year. Regan Russell.
Yeah.
And not the first time. Of course, remember Jill Phipps way back. Was it 95? Jill Phipps was killed outside Coventry Airport. Protesting against the export of calves. They were flying calves out from Coventry to, I don't know whether they were going Holland, I think maybe, for the veal trade. And Jill was protesting, and she got run over by a lorry. Similar situation to Regan.
Yeah, with Regan, apparently there's a new film out, but it's supposed to be quite graphic, so I don't know much about it. But apparently there's a film about her death that's been released recently. Don't know much about it. Do know a couple of people who've seen it. I think there are some fairly upsetting scenes, I think. I'm not sure, though.
Yeah, but it's kind of one of those things that was sadly bound to happen. I think the same as Jill's death was probably bound to happen. If you've got lorries and, you've got people driving the lorries that don't like the protesters, and, it's kind of, it's something that's going to happen sooner or later. And very sadly, it happened to Regan.
Yeah. Well, about 2 weeks ago, I went to a save thing outside a slaughterhouse in North Dublin, and I was wanting to make some contact with some people from Animal Rebellion. I was thinking of getting them to come on my Christmas Day extravaganza thing. And one lorry did come in, and they kind of went for the people, a very kind of aggressive, guy, and so even on the way back out again, he was just the same. So it was like the security guards of the slaughterhouse, which were trying to calm the guy down, because he was just one of these characters who just doesn't like to be, to be stopped. I mean, and of course the idea was to stop for about 3 minutes, but he wasn't into that at all. So there you go. So I guess you're right. I mean, like, some people just react badly to the idea of a protest, don't they? So.
Yeah, and when they're driving a a huge lorry, it only needs somebody to move, to step the wrong way, or a slight error of judgment, and it's too late.
And especially in North America, same as in Australia, the North American lorries are absolutely huge, aren't they? They're almost like, absolutely.
Massive.
This one in Ireland was a lot smaller than that. So here's your friend, I think. Here we go, Ronnie.
Yes, I mean, this has really affected the movement. COVID-19, that's really affected campaigning, really affected vegan education, and I mean, I think it was. I think the whole world pretty much dealt with it really badly. If we'd had a proper lockdown, really hard lockdown right from the beginning, it would be gone now, because it wouldn't have been able to spread. There'd have been no need or no perceived need for a vaccine at all. It would be gone if we'd had a proper lockdown. But of course, because so much pressure from business, we need to get working, get all these places open, etc., etc. You know, the lockdown wasn't hard enough; it was ended too soon, and look where we are now.
Yeah, well, I mean, the COVID experience, like all the rest, really does. You know, it says a lot about capitalism, because obviously that's been the great shakes. I mean, there's been over Christmas and New Year, there's been social pressure to ease off, but there's always been business reasons to ease off. You know, and I know a lot of people think that you know, it was kind of business people who are responsible for all this, but you know, to bring down global capitalism is an interesting kind of strategy if that is the case. And yeah, so I think the story about COVID, and of course, it's the new variants that seem to be a problem now.
You see, once again, you know, that they've only come because the virus has spread, and you know, the more it spreads and multiplies, the more likely it is to mutate, and the more likely you are to have variants. And had there been a proper lockdown, none of that would have happened. None of that would happen. But it kind of, to me, it kind of also shows the need to have some sort of world level administration. You know, you know, rather than having all these separate sort of nation states that do their own thing, you needed a world coordinated response to this, and that kind of really didn't happen because everyone's, you know, doing their separate.
United Federation of Planets, Ronnie. But I mean, that raises a really important point, because one of the arguments about how come we've got a vaccine so quickly is the fact that all these scientists from around the globe have actually cooperated rather than being competitors. And so that begs the question, well, why aren't you doing that all the time? You know, if you're saying that, you know, human health is your priority, how come you're not doing that with everything? Because there's a good chance that the solution to several things are in certain places around the globe. It's just that nobody's put them together. I mean, you know, look at things like human starvation. You know, if you can get a vaccine together in a year, which is unprecedented, you know, how come we can't use all this talent to solve that little problem as well? But of course, we're into a lot of politics at this stage.
The reason is because human health isn't number one priority. Number one priority is profit. I mean, nothing to do with health should be private. There shouldn't be like private drug corporations. It should all be publicly owned. All be publicly owned, because the number one aim of it should not be profit. The number one aim of it should be human health. And
so, the argument against that, of course, is the fact that you need private equity to do all the R&D, but of course that could come from public funds as well.
Of course it could, because at the end of the day, what you're talking about is how we're going to use resources. How are we going to use resources in terms of time, in terms of energy, and in terms of materials. That's kind of what it comes down to, and it is how you direct those resources. And that can be done, you know, under a system that isn't driven by profit.
Yeah, I think an interesting movement issue about COVID is the fact that obviously we talk about zoonotic diseases here, and yet there's been a big focus on factory farming. And I've noticed a lot of campaigners and groups have done that. And I think that might be a bit of a mistake, because, you know, I mean, obviously the argument is that factory farms, because of the concentration, are ideal places for these mutations to happen, especially if it's a question of going from the other animals back to humans and, you know, all that kind of stuff. At the same time, it seems to me that any use by humans of other animals and their bodies is going to be a potential problem. And we've just got to get away from the idea that the other animals are resources for our use. And so I'm not sure whether it's time for the conversation to move away from factory farming to just animal use, I think, because that's going to make the stronger argument. And of course, that's what we ultimately feel. I suppose the factory farming thing is almost like a tactic. It kind of gets you into welfare and stuff. So
I think so, because I'm sort of, I mean, Aviva have done a campaign in relation to factory farming being like a major cause of these zoonotic diseases. but they are pushing veganism at the same time. You know, the literature that they produced in relation to that, and on their website, it does push veganism. So factory farming is like a kind of to get people's attention, and then to say go vegan, because of course it's kind of, and it's not just like kind of intensive farming. It's invasion of wildlife territories. And
quite. But that's my point. So it's not all just factory farming. So you know, you can understand the argument. At the same time, from an animal rights point of view, you want to make a wider point that the factory farming, because people go, oh, in that case, it's another reason to go free range and all that crap. You know, we've got some more information about the Regan movie from Carl. Hi, Carl. The new Regan movement, unlike the former one made by her friends, which was censored, is very graphic, showing the aftermath of Regan's body being dismembered. Be warned if you're thinking of watching. Oh, blimey, I didn't know that.
That doesn't. I think, I think it's important that people kind of would get a warning like that at the beginning before.
Watching. Okay, so I mean that's a detail I didn't know.
No, I wasn't aware of that.
No. Okay.
That's right. And now we're on to the kind of, well, it's kind of we're still on the kind of bad, but there's kind of good interspersed with it, because obviously, kind of what happened was that obviously the virus and the lockdowns and various levels of lockdown, you know, severely affected campaigning, and I think what happened, I mean, we have few enough vegans as it is prepared to get out there and spread the vegan message, and kind of I think what happened with a lot of groups that were campaigning, they kind of stopped doing anything. They kind of stopped doing anything at all, so the amount of campaigning kind of went down even more. And of course there were a lot of things that it was very difficult to do, especially in the really heavy lockdown that we got kind of first of all. And then when things eased a bit, there were some groups that did go out and take to the streets. This is some people in Middlesbrough that did this was a day of action against fishing. They took part in, and they were able to do it in a socially distanced way and educate the public. Basically to go vegan, but using the angle, you know, kind of starting off on the fishing thing and then, you know, spreading the vegan message that way. So that was an example of people that kind of did carry on campaigning to some extent.
It's interesting, this one, because obviously you got the eating other animals causes pandemics on the face mask. That's interesting, but also so in terms of claims making, but also it's about the sentiency of fishers, which is obviously like a bit of a neglected area in the movement, if you like. It's one that we tend to kind of not totally shy away from, but we certainly don't prioritize it, I guess.
Yeah, which is a kind of that's kind of odd, really, because overwhelmingly it's actually it's fish that are slaughtered for human consumption. I mean, if you look at the figures for the consumption of animals in the UK, there's about 8 billion a year. 7 billion are sea animals, including including fishes. It's massive, huge numbers of fish are killed.
Globally, we're talking trillions, aren't we? Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, it's almost like it's a number that you can't really compute in your head, really, when you say, "Oh, trillions are killed," and you're thinking, "What does that even mean?" Like, you know.
So it's really important to highlight, and to also highlight their suffering. They go through horrendous suffering, and you know, the way they're caught, especially industrialized fishing, where they're dragged up from the ocean. But also something that's kind of happening more now is the fish farming, and that's like factory farming of fish, really. Huge suffering involved in that as well, and that, you know, kind of people aren't aware. But people become pescatarian. People think they're great. Oh, I've become a pescatarian, aren't I good? Well, no, not really, because now, like, more animals are dying because of you now that you're a pescatarian than did before. You know, this is the thing. It's not a, you know, it's not a way forward at all to do that.
No. So going back in the day, Ronnie, there was one of these intensive fish farms in Cumbria, and we went there to try and suss out what was going on. Couldn't get anywhere near it because they had like a little flock of geese and
guard geese.
Yeah, even like half a mile away, that they all kicked off. Just couldn't get anywhere near the thing. So
Yeah.
anyway, right,
Yeah,
moving on.
Somebody. I think somebody's asked Deb about how about the animal testing component in the fast track production of this vaccine. In particular, doesn't that beg the question of only cell use in human trials and eliminate the other animals? Well, I mean, it's kind of, you know, there are a lot of scientists that do say that, you know, all these pharmaceutical products that are being useful
That
for
one
humans.
there,
Yeah, that one. Yeah, you know, it seems to me the increasing number of scientists are saying that these things are developed not because of animal testing, but in spite of animal testing. You know, because of the way that animals react so differently to humans to many of these things. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a scientist myself, but it's interesting that you know appears to be something that's an opinion that seems to be increasing. I mean, my objection to animal experiments is I always put forward the moral objection rather than scientific one. Not being a scientist myself, I kind of don't really know all the arguments, but the moral argument against them is irrefutable, and I think that's the strongest argument.
Yeah. There's this little technical issue from Vegan Gaze. Does anybody have an issue on mobiles where sometimes the chat freezes? No, I think there was a period where nobody kind of commented for a while, but I didn't know about the actual chat freezing.
Yeah, it did stop for a while. Yeah.
Oh, it did. Oh, okay. All right.
It didn't freeze, but I think there weren't any comments.
Okay.
Vegan Pixie Warrior.
Let's go back to this little yoke then. Yeah. So you've picked on Ireland for this one, Ronnie.
Yeah, I thought I'd pick on Ireland. I mean, you know, because I'm in Dublin. I mean, there's a lot going on in Dublin. I think you're there, aren't you, on the end?
That's me. That's me with my blue gloves on.
Yeah, that's Vegan Education on the Go and Vegan Information Project together, I think, isn't it, on this one? And that's
this will be well. It's a Vigo event and kind of VIP. It's more like in a support role. The VIP would do a kind of smaller thing. If people look at that picture, you can't actually see it on the screen, but to the right, there's a complete set of banners which go all the way down the street. You know, so it's a huge area. I always say that you know, because I want to do an interview with Declan Bowens, because he started off essentially with one little table and said on Facebook, I'm gonna go outside, you know, the bank. Anybody going to be there, type of thing. And then I think now, you know, kind of size-wise, I think it's probably the biggest grassroots regular event in the world now. I think it's absolutely huge because there's all this going on to the right of the picture, but there's a lot of stuff going on to the left that you can't see. It's out of shot, if you like. So
it goes on. I think in that series of photos that I think I don't know whether you posted them on Facebook or Declan. There is a shot that shows, you know, all the banners and placards like stretching into infinity.
Yeah, because there's also some kind of you know what they call them. Can't remember the name of them now, but you know, there's other banners, you know, because some people walk through. We used to call it the vegan tunnel of love, because it means that you've got banners on the right and the left, so you know, it can't really be missed really.
Someone starts at the end as like a kind of total animal oppressor and and by the time they've walked past all this long thing, they're totally vegan at the other end, and then they become an activist. Well, that's hopefully the idea of it.
Okay, I'm gonna have to get this. I think I got to get that off. Okay, now we can go back. Okay, boom. There we are. Okay, right.
There we are. That's it. Yeah, and that was good. I mean, it was great that carried on. And this is our group, Wild Forest Vegans, North Worcestershire. We've always done loads of door dropping. It's been a really big part of our activism. Various was one of the reasons we haven't got a situation where we've got big spaces in our. We've got 3 towns that aren't very big, and so street activism we do some, but there isn't a lot of room. We do lots of door dropping, and I don't know why other groups don't do it. Like, so if this was something that could have been done. Like, all groups could have carried on. Certainly when the really heavy lockdown eased, earlier in the year, like, everyone could have done door dropping, and yet so few groups did, and I think so few groups even consider it. They just think, how you do outreach is you go on the street and you do stuff on the street. You don't think about going around putting leaflets through people's letterboxes, and I think that's it's a very effective way of spreading the message. And that's something we've been doing kind of regularly, and this is the Viva's leaflet. Animal farming is killing us. Which kind of talks about
at least it doesn't say factory farming.
It doesn't say factory farming. It talks about factory farming in it, but it does urge people to go vegan. And so,
I suppose, from my point of view, and this is the bit where we would disagree, is I think when you were saying why don't people do it, is because they're going to have to go to the national groups to get the literature, because with a door drop you're going to be getting rid of quite a lot of actual material. In Ireland, all the groups print their own leaflets, so that would be an extra cost. So this is where the funding bit comes from, because I wouldn't be in favour of giving out a Viva thing in Ireland. But that's just the thing about the funding situation, but there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, Animal Aid send out leaflets free. I mean, if loads and loads of groups started asking Animal Aid for them, whether they could afford to keep sending them for free, we certainly get loads free from Animal Aid. Viva, generally, if you want a large amount of leaflets from Viva, you need to pay for them. Kind of, that's what we did.
Oh, you've got to pay to be their agents, have you? That's good.
But then I suppose, in a sense. But then, it's kind of.
Well, you are providing free labour for them, and also you're advertising for them, and they're the ones who are going to get the subscription, and they're the ones who are going to get the legacies. So it should be free. That's the least they could do.
I mean, I know what you say, but it's just a question of, like, how do you get the leaflets? And if that's the only way of getting them, then you kind of weigh it up. We need to be out there educating people. I mean, we could print our own, but then again, it can often be cheaper to send away for them than kind of have them printed as well. So that's. I mean, what I kind of like to see would be some sort of system where, like, independent, local vegan and animal rights groups, kind of, we had our own printing service. We had our own printing service that we could all get, where we could all get leaflets printed. That would be great if somebody set something like that up that we could all use.
Yeah, it would be. In fact, there's a comment from Vegan Pixie Worry. You can print it off from the Viva website. We wouldn't do that in Ireland.
You can, but it's just a question of, like, if you're going to print large numbers. I mean, we drop hundreds and hundreds, thousands of leaflets, and so that kind of amount you can't print them out on your home printer. You'd have to get them professionally printed.
Although Declan produces thousands of leaflets, and he's got a little leaflet pack and everything, and that's done on a photocopier, because it's a bit of a myth that people like glossy, full color leaflets, and they won't take the more kind of amateurish looking ones, or even ones that look like zines. VIP specialize in zine style ones, and people are fine. You can see them take the Go Vegan World ones, and then they'll take all the Vigo ones and the VIP ones, and they don't seem to discriminate. They're interested in the issue more than, this one's not color, I'm not going to touch it, kind of issue. And also you've got to think about the environmental impact of this heavy-duty glossy paper compared with just recycled paper that you put through a photocopier. So I think there's a good case for the grassroots to strike out a little bit on this particular issue. But then that's just one where we've clashed on before. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of, what's ideal and what's practical.
Given the time thing, that's right. Again, you need to look out for these places that will give you a deal. We used to get free ink, for example, so you could use as much ink as you want, because ink is the problem. The printers are quite cheap. The ink is the problem.
Yeah, but anyway, however, where people get the leaflets, I think this is the idea of door dropping. Why don't more people do it? It's kind of easy, and it's something that's, especially in the COVID situation, it's something that everyone can be doing, and someone could do it on their own. Somebody that doesn't really kind of want to kind of do stuff with other people. We've got some people that kind of just go and door drop their own area. But one thing I'd say on that is I think that there's like, and this is like before I go on to that, this is this is an initiative there. Kind of probably can't see the whole thing, but this is a screenshot from a Facebook event. There's a vegan activist down in Bristol area, Jo Dixon. She got 5,000 of these leaflets. That's it. She got 5,000 of these printed, and then sent them out to anyone that wanted them to door drop their own areas. And that was really good. And she had a really good take up of those. And that was just someone's own initiative she funded the leaflets, and I actually got them printed for her. And I think they all went, and people were delivering all over the country. And I think next year it's probably going to increase, going to have more printed and get more people doing it. And quite a few of those people are probably maybe not even in groups, just people that just want to go out and just, because it is something that somebody can just do on their own.
There's a question for you to talk about, Ronnie, from Terry there. For door dropping, how would I go about setting routes?
Okay, what we do is we print maps out. Probably the best program for printing maps out is one called Street Map. I think it's streetmap.co.uk is the website. And what you can do is you can go down to certain different levels of like detail. And it's probably best to use the highest level of detail, because the highest level of detail actually shows you where the houses are on Street Map. And then what I tend to do is I get the area that I want. I'll take a screenshot and print it out, and then you've got a map, and you can mark the map off with a marker pen to make sure that you don't do the same. To make sure you don't do the same area twice. One really important piece of advice for people doing door dropping is take some kind of a stick with you. I mean, that's not to beat the anti-vegans.
Although this is the dog issue, isn't it?
This is because you get dogs, don't you, in the hall of houses, and when they bark, well, that's all right because they're there. But you get these ones that wait silently, the silent lurker, and then they'll have you. And I've been bitten a few times, so before I realised that I'm doing it wrong. And so what you need to do is take something like a spatula with you, or a similar shaped piece of wood, and actually push the leaflets through with that. And then all the dog does is think, oh, blimey, somebody's put a stick through the letterbox for me to play with, and they might grab the stick, but they're not going to grab your hand. And that's really important, because the number of people I know that have been bitten by dogs when they door drop in. So, take a stick and push it through the stick.
They'd only bite you once, though, Ronnie, because they'd be going, oh, this vegan meat, that's no good, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they taste the spinach or whatever. Yeah, I know. I mean, I was thinking, like, I got this idea to make like a sort of some severed paper mache fingers, and put them through someone's letterbox, where they got one of these dogs. But then I worry about, are they going to take it out on the dog? That they've bitten someone's fingers off.
What about this point from Carl, Ronnie? I'd be wary of advising somebody to leaflet alone. You're essentially invading someone's private space, and you never know what reaction you might get from animal users. So safety in numbers is best. But even when you're with people, you'll be on the different side of the road anyway, wouldn't you? I suppose so.
Well, you've got someone close by. In fact, that's not really a problem I've kind of I've ever experienced. Where, to be quite honest, that's kind of never happened. I've never experienced like. I remember once we were door dropping. This wasn't one person, as a group of people. We were door dropping for the West Midlands Vegan Festival in Wolverhampton. Once again, this is a festival that Kevin White, I mentioned previously. He's organised every year for about 10 or 11 years, and that hasn't happened now for a couple of years, sadly, but because the building was being renovated. And we were door dropping for that, and we delivered these leaflets. So we'd gone up the street, and the door opened down the road, and a bloke threw the leaflet out into the street and shouted out, "I don't want vegan." And he threw the leaflet out in the middle of the road. But luckily, we were further up the road, so you kind of can... You occasionally, but that's about the worst I think that's kind of ever happened. It doesn't really, and I always say to people, like, if they're kind of, somebody does come out and they're worried, just say to them, "Oh, just make out you're from a leaflet delivery company and that you don't know, what the person's talking about." If somebody's really, doesn't want to kind of get involved in a discussion. So yeah. It's kind of, and I understand the point on that, but it's not in practical terms. I've not known it happen.
You've also got a take on this idea of making sure you don't go to ones that say no junk mail. You think it's still okay, don't you, Ronnie?
Yeah, I mean, junk mail is what the postie delivers. Junk mail is what comes with with your letters. And so if it says junk mail, I'd still put a leaflet through. But if it says,
people putting that on their door or window, they're going to be thinking of those leaflets too, aren't they? Really?
Well, it's just, yeah. I mean, if people are nervous of putting one through where it says junk mail, then fine, don't put one through. Personally, I'd put it through. The person came out and said, it says no junk mail. I'd say, this isn't junk mail. This is a leaflet. If you don't want leaflets, put a sign on your door saying no leaflets.
And has that ever happened?
No, I don't think it has. I've never had someone come out. No, I've never experienced where someone had a no junk mail thing and they came out and said it was junk mail. But if they did, I'd say no, it's not junk mail because it isn't technically.
Okay.
I'd say, well, put a sign. If you don't want leaflets, put a sign on your door. And some people do put a sign on the door saying no leaflets.
No leaflets.
I mean, I had I remember once doing door dropping, and there was a sign on this person's door saying no junk mail, no leaflets, no door-to-door salespeople, no religious organisations, and no Elvis impersonators. So you'd have been in trouble.
Oh yeah. I just can't help believing. Yeah. So Michelle is still celebrating the fact that she was bitten by a dog. Then Terry makes a point about junk food. And then there's one here from Debbie, which is interesting. This idea, but we've all seen it in the films. Of course, they don't have letterboxes in North America. They have these standalone mailboxes, which I presume that would actually make the job easier because you don't even have to go up the driveway usually, do you?
Oh no, that's a lot easier. I've just been brought a cup of tea. Louise.
Hey, Louise, you got one for me, have you, or what?
Come and say hello. Here we are.
Hang on a sec. Can you see me? I'm
you can see your glasses.
Oh.
There she is.
Oh, hi.
Did you make me a cup of tea, Louise?
Yeah, you didn't make Roger a cup. That's not fair.
No, I didn't, did I, mate?
No.
Disgrace.
See the top of my head. Hi. Hi.
You're sideways. It looks like
Louise
one of those
will take over the conversation now.
No. No, I know my limits.
No, you can. You're much more interested than I am.
I'll leave you to the grandmasters. The grandmaster, Roger Yates.
Oh, here's one from Terry saying that in North America, paper boys or paper persons throw the paper without even getting off their bikes.
Yeah, they do. I mean, that's what you see. I've seen that on the movies. But yeah, I mean, going back to the boxes. Yeah, the boxes. When someone's got a box outside their house instead of the actual letterbox, it's so much easier. Except I have got this paranoia that there might be a tiny little dog in the box.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's the way.
Just took me a couple of questions. A couple of seconds there, I was thinking you were making a serious point, and I was thinking, look out, this is Ronnie Lee, so of course not.
No.
Yeah. So shall we go back to your potentially controversial thing, because you're advertising Veganuary here?
Yes. Veganuary. I mean, we're doing door dropping for Veganuary locally. We're doing social media advertising for Veganuary. Now, I have I kind of have mixed feelings about Veganuary. I mean, Veganuary tends to be very much about people switching to a plant diet rather than veganism. So it's kind of perhaps should be called Plant Diet January or whatever. Although I must say that some of the the promotion for it does feature the oppression of animals and the exploitation of animals and why that's wrong. So that's all included in it. But I think it's a good.
I don't know much about Veganuary.
It's kind of but the thing is, I think that whatever people feel about it, it's a good first step. I think basically you want people to make that first step, and then once they've made that first step, you can take them further along the road. And so, from that point of view, I think it's a good thing. And of course,
if I was going to make a kind of sociological point, I would say that I've always had an issue about a 1 month thing, and even Challenge 22 and those kind of things. And then there was a national group came out with this ridiculous idea of try vegan for a day, as though you can adopt a philosophy for a day. But the thing about that is that our palates become trained through socialization when we're kids, and there's an element of resocialization that goes on when people switch to a plant diet, and kind of 1 month might not be enough really. And so I wonder what happens at the end of the month. I mean, I know that there's a lot of arguments about, people, they remain in contact and they remain supported and everything. But I just wonder whether at the end of the month, people are thinking, well, this is not doing it for me or something, because, the concentration's on diet. So for me, I think you'd need a big dose of ethics embedded into Veganuary, and like I say, I don't know much about it, so maybe it's there already, and I just don't know.
There is an ethical element to it. It's not just about this vegan food is tasty and great and healthy and all that. But I think as part of Veganuary, people are encouraged to carry on with it. I mean, it's just like kind of presenting, try this for a month, and people see that as okay. That's kind of I can kind of get my head around that. I can kind of cope with that. It's like a month. But once they get into that month, and once they kind of start, going on the Veganuary website and everything, they are encouraged to carry on. Definitely encouraged to carry on.
I think going back to the point you made about it should be called plant-based January or whatever. Obviously, it doesn't trip off the tongue. In fact, it's interesting. It took people about 2 years to get used to saying Veganuary, but it's. All the kind of focus on the food is a problem, because when you say try vegan this month, I mean, veganism is a philosophy,
Yes.
I mean, so I suppose at a stretch you could say, check out this philosophy for a month. I suppose you could say that, but that's not really what they're saying. They're saying try eating plant-based for a month. That's what they're saying, isn't it?
That's what they're saying. That's really what they're saying. And I think this is a kind of a kind of difficulty with the word vegan being used to describe a type of food or a type of diet, and also being used to describe a philosophy, because the two get confused. You know,
it's an endless movement problem, it seems to me, Ronnie, because we obviously, I mean, we know, and we'll get onto celebrities in a while, but we know that, you know, a lot of people described as vegan or get labeled vegan against their will even are actually plant-based, and they're quite happy with that label. It's just that we in the vegan movement often want to, as it were, make the vegan movement appear as large as possible, which obviously there's obviously reasons why you would want to do that. At the same time, it is important, in my view, to differentiate vegan from plant-based diets, but it's a difficult thing, because you end up then getting a lot of people kind of accusing each other. Well, you're not really vegan, you're plant, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So that in a sense is not helpful. At the same time, there is a real divide there. So it's one of these tricky kind of movement dilemmas, it seems to me.
Yeah, I mean, my point, you know, it's my approach is that you get people. You get people to take the first steps along a road. I mean, the thing is that yes, veganism is a philosophy, and kind of you either accept that philosophy or you don't. You can't try a philosophy, can you? You know, you either agree with it or you don't agree with it. But I think living according to that philosophy is kind of a learning process, because you can accept that you know that it's wrong for humans to oppress other animals, and then you can start thinking, well, how do I avoid becoming involved with that? You know, how do I educate others not to be involved with that? What are the various, you know, and that's a process. What are the various, you know, what are the areas of oppression, you know? Because I mean, for instance, you know, I see people on Facebook where, you know, on vegan groups where they posted something. Please support me. I'm doing a fundraiser for Cancer Research UK, or I'm doing a fundraiser for the British Heart Foundation. I think they're doing something really good and wanting all these other vegans to support them, not realising that these organisations fund experiments on animals. You see, because they just don't know. They're just not aware. And so you kind of, you know, our task is to make those people aware. Say, hang on a minute, you know, what you're kind of doing there isn't consistent with the vegan ethic, because you're promoting these organisations that fund animal experiments. And I don't think people. I think a lot of it is just people not knowing, because these days so much is about the food. So much is about the food that people forget about the other things.
Yeah, it does raise a really tricky issue too, which is kind of not really. I don't think we've thought very much about this issue, but it is real, it seems to me, and we've tried to kind of look at this, you know, as part of the wonderful animal rights show team. This issue that you might get people who do fully accept the philosophy of veganism, but in terms of some aspects of it, they as it were can't live that way, even though they want to. I mean, there are some examples, like for example, domestic violence, where you know, people can be kind of bullied into eating animal products, for example, or maybe using, you know, tested products, that kind of thing. And that's very similar to what you were saying about the care homes. So that's another tricky movement issue, because, you know, you go, oh well, if they're eating other animals, then they're not vegan, even if they actually fully endorse the idea of veganism. So that's another kind of, you know, we're not allowed to say chicken and egg situation, but that is kind of that like that, right? So,
well, the Vegan Society's definition talks about avoiding animal products as far as is practicable and possible. You know, that it's not like a kind of how can I say, it's not an absolutist. It's not an absolutist position, and I would think that would kind of include the situation where somebody, you know, was coerced.
Yeah, I think so too, except the real problem with practicable and possible is this thing about, well, you can be a bit wishy-washy about it then, and I'll be a flexitarian, or, you know, this kind of stuff. So that has also kind of got a bit of a problem to it. I mean, it's like all social movements. There's these kind of nuances about being a participant that they're
Yeah.
not, they're not necessarily that easy to resolve, and so, kind of sound bites might not do it. We need to think, quite deeply about that. Shall we move on then, Ronnie?
Yes.
Who's your mate?
Oh, we're on to the awful, because we talked about he's about to strangle. He's about to strangle
A
somebody
football.
we're about to strangle a football or somebody that actually believes that the climate emergency is real. David Icke. And now I'm on to the awful. We've had the bad. This is the awful. Conspiracy theories. The icon of conspiracy theories, who believes that he's son of God, I think, and that really the Earth's being controlled by this kind of reptilians from another dimension, and all very, very scientifically based and proved, of course. And this is something that's kind of so much kind of increased in the kind of vegan movement during lockdown. I think maybe because people are so much more on social media and they've got kind of nothing better to do. The amount of vegans that kind of believe in these conspiracy theories is kind of to me it's kind of quite frightening, really. That COVID doesn't exist. That that the climate crisis hasn't been created by humans, and even worse things than that. That's and this has led to lots of how can I say lots of discussions, lots of kind of we've been diverted down that road, really, of people arguing about these things. When the focus should be how do we promote, because the thing is what certainly isn't a conspiracy, what certainly isn't a conspiracy theory, shall I say, is the oppression of other animals. The fact that 50,000 living sentient beings are slaughtered every second of every day, and that's just to feed the human species, let alone all those that suffer and die through our impact on the environment, experiments, etc., etc. That's the reality. That's not a theory, and we should be concentrating on kind of fighting that instead of kind of going down these kind of these roads of kind of fantasy. I think I know where it's come from, though, because I think it's and why a lot of vegans get caught up in these things, and I think it's because kind of when you become vegan, immediately you realise that a huge aspect of what you kind of previously regarded as normal and acceptable no longer is. The whole way that you're eating, the whole attitude that you had towards other animals was completely wrong. And I think then when that happens, that people start thinking about other things. Are other things right? Are other things that are taken for granted? Are other things that I kind of accepted as being right and normal? Maybe those things are wrong as well. And I think this is where people kind of start getting into the conspiracy theory thing. But I think it's kind of a question of not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That kind of we need to stick to science and veganism. Veganism kind of goes. It goes with sort of ethics. It's a moral position to take, but it's kind of also rational and scientific as well. It's not an anti-science thing, and I think it's unfortunate that these things, these kind of strange ideas, have somehow become associated with veganism. I never understood why at vegan fairs you get people. Why are there people, with tables reading tarot cards at vegan fairs? What was that? What's that got to do with veganism? Nothing. Stalls where people are promoting angels and stuff. It's got nothing to do with veganism. Veganism is a political and social philosophy of animal liberation. It's got nothing to do with any of these things. And yet somehow these weird and wonderful ideas kind of got associated with our movement, and I think I don't think that's good.
Okay. I'm just seeing if that's going to be a room divider. I think the next one might be, which is this one.
Yeah. This is another thing that's sort of kind of these people have come out the cracks, haven't they? The right-wing vegans, and once again, I think this is once again because more people are kind of on social media, nothing better to do than to kind of, air their views on social media. And it's been quite frightening, the number of kind of these kind of right-wing vegans, vegans for Trump, vegans for a guy that kind of, that kind of withdrew from the agreement to combat the climate crisis, which is like, responsible for millions of wild animals dying as we speak. The guy that withdrew from that, the guy that wants bears shot in their dens, that guy. I support him, and right-wing vegans. I mean, how is veganism anyway consistent with the right-wing philosophy? It isn't, and so you kind of, to me, you can't be vegan and right-wing. It's not consistent with our philosophy at all. And so it's disturbing. I think these people are only a kind of minority, and there's an argument it may well be best to just ignore them.
It's a growing one if it is. But to play devil's advocate, Ronnie, and to try and paraphrase Michelle Lowe's position, she says that she wants everybody to be vegan, regardless of their kind of political views. But then if they do have oppressive political views, those should be called out and challenged, which in a way is similar to kind of Steve Best's position in a strange kind of way. I think that I would agree with you that, Michelle would say, if you're homophobic, you can still be vegan, but you'll get your homophobia called out. I'm not sure that being homophobic means that your values chime at all with vegan values. And so I think that here we might still have a position where we're really talking about the difference between plant-based and vegan. And I think that you could say, I want everybody to be plant-based, but then you want to educate them to move on to veganism, which would mean, in the kind of eyes of the pioneers, as it were, you gain a vegan mindset. And that mindset is based on justice and peace and nonviolence as the ultimate goals. And so if you're sexist, racist, homophobic, the idea that you can become a vegan just doesn't sit with me at all. But I can see how such people could be plant-based. Would you agree with that one?
Well, I think also, I think that they're plant eaters. They're not vegans. There's also, from the point of view of the progress of our movement, that we want as many people as possible to be involved in our movement to be, become vegan and campaign for veganism. And we want people of, whatever their sexuality, whatever their kind of ethnic origins, their race, we want everyone, to kind of be involved, all those people to be involved. And so if we have people who are like racist, sexist, homophobic in our movement, that's going to stop that from happening. People aren't, I don't want to be involved in that group because like there's sexists in that group or there's homophobes in that group. And so that's actually going to deter people from getting involved in our movement and, promoting veganism. So it's harmful in that way. The other thing is...
how would you respond to positions like this? Animal rights should be as compatible with the right wing as human rights, which is an interesting premise in the first place, I think.
Well, human rights aren't really... the right isn't great on human rights, is it? But no, the other aspect, and that's one aspect, the other aspect is like, if you're going to argue against, our movement, the vegan movement, it's an anti-speciesist movement. It's opposed to speciesism, it's opposed to human supremacism. So if someone's a racist, if someone's a sexist, homophobe, if they have oppressive views, prejudicial views to humans that are different to them, then how can that person make a case against speciesism? How can that make a case? They make a case that it's wrong to, have those negative views towards, other animals because they're different to us. You see, it doesn't. It's an inconsistent position. And the other really important thing about the ideas of the right being inconsistent with veganism is to do with economics, because you'll get some right wing people say, "Well, I'm not racist or sexist. I'm not prejudiced in that way," but they still believe in right wing economics, in capitalism, in neoliberalism, stuff like that, and those kind of those economic systems are oppressive to other animals because they drive consumption, they drive materialism, they drive overproduction, they drive waste, all these things that drive the climate crisis, and all these things are hugely harmful to other animals. They're hugely harmful to wild animals. I mean, I said earlier that we've got millions of wild animals dying now because of the impact on their habitat caused by the climate crisis. You see, so an economic system that drives that is not compatible with animal liberation. Is not compatible with veganism. So, from both a social and an economic view, someone that holds right wing.
Well, I think you're kind of answering Leon's point here. Get them to go vegan first, do the politics afterwards. But the problem is their politics will stop them going vegan. It might allow them to have a plant diet, but their politics will stand in the way of embracing vegan values.
So you had someone that believed in that agreed with animal experiments, that carried out animal experiments. So you've got someone that went hunting or agreed with hunting, right? And they adopted a plant diet. You wouldn't say, "Oh, that person's become vegan." They haven't become vegan, have they? Because they still believe in these other things that oppress animals. And it's actually the same with people that believe in right-wing economics. They support an economic system that oppresses other animals. And so just because they adopt a plant diet doesn't make them vegan any more than adopting a plant diet would make a vivisector vegan.
What do you think of Michelle's position here, Ronnie? People can compartmentalize very easily. It's easy to believe that non-human animals should not be exploited, but still hold negative attitudes like homophobia. Yeah,
I mean that may well be the case, but it's not consistent. It isn't consistent, is it? The one view is not consistent with the other, because if somebody's a homophobe, how can they put forward an argument against speciesism? Because they are actually prejudiced
by divorcing those two issues.
Yeah. Well, because an argument against speciesism relies on the argument against interhuman prejudice, doesn't it? That's how we would make the argument against speciesism. So you can't make it if you're prejudiced against human just because they're different. How can you make an argument against prejudice towards other animals just because they're different? You can't. You've got no basis for that.
This argument here, Gawain, I assume, it's going to stop people joining our movement if we exclude 2/3 of the world's population. And of course, that is kind of related in a way to this idea that we want as many people to join the vegan movement as possible. The real problem is that if they don't have vegan values, then the actual values of veganism are threatened, which is what social movement theory suggests happens to social movements. If you get a lot of people coming in with all these disparate values, and ultimately veganism is about justice, and I think the ultimate bottom line situation for veganism is if you see a issue of injustice, that is a vegan issue ultimately. And so that essentially is kind of what we're talking about. And so it's it's a difficult one, because it's kind of like, well, bring everybody in and then try and sort it out.
Or get them plant based. Get them to promote. If you're promoting a plant, it's like Veganuary. You're planting basically eating a plant diet, and then you get people eating a plant diet, and then once they're eating a plant diet, then kind of expose them to like the reasons why these other things are wrong. That's kind of how you do it. But they don't. But just because someone eats a plant diet doesn't mean they're vegan. I think there's a confusion. It comes back to that confusion between Yeah,
and it's also something to do, like Carl says here, it's something to do with the functioning, the viability, the feasibility, sustainability of a social movement as well. Because as you were alluding to before, Ronnie, when you've got people who have got all kinds of prejudices and oppressive attitudes in their head, they are making this movement then very unsafe for people that on the face of it should be our best allies. And I know that creates a wider argument that we could kind of go on for an hour about, in the sense that, are we ultimately left leaning and this kind of idea, so it's not that simple. But it's certainly the case that, this argument, I want men's rights activists to be marching along with feminists. Well, that doesn't make feminists feel safe. I want anti-racists to be walking alongside racists. How does that even work? Okay, and unless you do this, put everything into compartments, as Michelle says. But that's not really what a social movement does. I don't think we're trying to create a liberationist mindset. Now, how do you do that with that kind of attitude in the movement? It just seems to me to make the job impossible, because you're trying to fit too many round pegs into square holes, to me. Ooh, right, let's see. We'll move on. I just wanted to show you this one. It isn't considered. This is Michelle again, but compartmentalization allows them to hold two opposing beliefs easily. Michelle, you just want me to say compartmentalization a few times. That's what's going on there. Okay, let's get back to this then. See if you can divide the room any more, Ronnie. I'm trying to remember what comes up after this now.
Right, now we're on to the good now. Now.
This is good.
Now, you see, I really like the lockdown in a lot of ways. The real severe lockdown, because you went out. There were no cars on the roads. It was like kind of like getting more towards the sort of society we want. Where the human impact on the environment and therefore on the habitat of animals, of other animals, becomes much less. And we had situations where like wild animals kind of moved in, started moving into housing estates and things. There's a picture of these deer on someone's lawn because they kind of had the space to do so. There weren't all these humans driving around in tin boxes and stuff, and there was something like kind of really good about that. And also you had situations where air pollution became much, much less. I think in Delhi, for instance, they had the clearest skies that they'd had for decades and decades and decades, because, there was less production going on, far fewer vehicles on the roads and all that. And it was a little kind of snapshot of kind of really how things kind of could be, in where humans had, less of an impact. And of course, that's all changed now. Cars, you had to be careful, because you got a few maniacs that thought, because there's no one else on the road, that they could drive at 100 miles an hour through a built-up area. So you had to be careful crossing the road in case a car came from nowhere. But it was kind of, I kind of, there was a big part of me that really liked it, that really liked the kind of the strict lockdown, because people were kind of more kept under control, in the sense of like not impacting on, on the natural world. And I think that kind of, it was good. And the thing is, if these measures, I mean, like I said earlier, the lockdown didn't come soon enough. It wasn't hard enough. If all that had been done worldwide, the virus had be gone by now. We could be kind of back to normal, I suppose. But we're going to talk about that later. That normal isn't great.
The idea of normal.
The idea of normal, yeah. So, and another thing that's kind of come out of it is, of course, one thing that's happened is because there's been less time to do things kind of outside, there's sort of been more time to do things online. And one of the things I've been wanting to do for a long time was to kind of get together a kind of coalition of independent local vegan activists and animal rights groups, because we haven't had that for a long time. I mean, what's kind of happened is what we kind of got now is these what I call franchise organisations. Like we've got the Save Movement and we've got DXE to some extent, and Anonymous for the Voiceless, and they're kind of what they are is like these kind of global organisations that have their own local chapters, they call it. It kind of reminds me of the Hells Angels. Local chapters that, and I'm sure a lot of what they do is positive, but the thing is that there's kind of there are people doing stuff apart from that. There are local local groups campaigning in their local areas, and there's no network for those groups, and there kind of hasn't been since the Animal Rights Coalition, which kind of I think started in the 1990s, didn't it, Roger, and went on into the 2000s. A guy called Neil Lee was a big driving force behind that.
That's right.
And then he became ill and died, and it kind of all faded away. And that was this was like pre-internet, and there was a newsletter sent round, and people had national, regional get-togethers and stuff. And that was kind of good for like the independent local groups, because it's a way that they could share information and learn from one another.
So how do you see this developing then, Ronnie?
Well, I kind of, I mean, at the moment, I think there's about 34 groups involved from the UK and Ireland. This is the UK and Ireland, this one. And I kind of, and already, people are sharing ideas and information on there. I'd like that to happen a lot more. There's a lot of groups I've been in touch with and asked if they'd like their representatives to join, and they've not got back. So I don't know whether that's because they don't like me or they're not very active at the moment. I mean, obviously, I'd like that to cover, there's a lot more groups that kind of need to be brought into it. And I'd like to be, to start, it's kind of like really a kind of information sharing where people can share ideas. So, we did this, and in our area, and somebody in another area.
It's a private group. It's a private group, isn't it? So if there's people in the chat that want to be part of it, they could contact you, and then you could, as it were, invite. Is that the way it works? Yeah,
what it is, it's a group for people that are the kind of organisers, stroke coordinators of local independent animal rights and vegan groups.
Oh, that's a cue for you to say your tripartite scheme.
Yeah. I'll have to. I will. Definitely come on to my mantra soon. I've got to say that every time I do one of these things, I have to say my mantra, and I will. But I think it's kind of so. If someone's involved in in organising, like a local group, and basically it's to do with being kind of it's a group that's been focused on an area, and it's focused on like kind of general animal rights, general vegan campaigning, rather than like just on kind of single issues. Then get in touch with me, and what we're doing is we're kind of allowing, so we don't get flooded with like loads and loads of people on it, because you get people who just join groups for the sake of it on Facebook. It's like two people from each group can join. And hopefully, it's kind of been restricted by COVID, because, a lot of groups haven't done a lot. and stuff. But I think it could be a good resource for for sharing information, maybe some coordinated stuff where there's a coordinated day of action.
You doing anything like having Zoom meetings with everybody in that group or anything like that?
Eventually, I think that would be good, and even things that could be, like we talked earlier about having like a printing place. Can we get a printing place set up? That will kind of, and can we get someone that will kind of do something to get some money in? Because this is like a problem for the grassroots movement is finance. Because what happens is, like the national organisations and also the kind of this kind of global franchise groups, they'll get like huge donations from kind of very rich vegans, and they also get, certainly the kind of national groups get legacies, and that's where a load of their money comes from. But the kind of local groups tend to suffer in terms of finance, because they don't get those donations. Because I think when people want to make donations like that, they're looking for something big. They're looking for like something big and something solid to give their money to. You see, so if we were to create something kind of big and solid for the kind of the local grassroots groups, if there was like a kind of like somewhere where somebody could kind of give some money, and then that money would be distributed to the different groups or given to groups as and when they needed it. That would be a way of kind of getting around that. So that's maybe something that can be done in the future.
Yeah. Well, Declan Bowen's got some breaking news on that, but I can't divulge it yet. But I think that's going to be coming fairly soon. Also, there's a couple of individuals on the Animal Rights Show team. I think they're going to put together a series of generic leaflets for people to download. So would that be a good place for that feature, so people could download them, print them out, add their name or put their sticker on it and everything, and it becomes their leaflet then, doesn't it?
Yeah, that would be good if there's a place where they can kind of add their own detail. I mean, we've kind of done that on the vegan, because with the Veganuary leaflets, we've had 5,000 printed to distribute locally, and what we did was like Veganuary, they didn't produce their own leaflets; they supplied artwork, and so we got their artwork, but we added a bit about our own group on it. And
did they leave a space for that? Did they?
Kind of not sort of deliberately, but we kind of I sort of made a space for it and put it on there and got them and kind of got them printed.
These groups, they just don't understand the grassroots, do they? They don't really.
No, it's kind of not really. But you see, the thing is that but they kind of need the grassroots. You see, if you
they'll need them and they'll exploit them, but they don't understand them and they don't fund them either.
But they're kind of not, and they kind of don't really sort of promote the grassroots, because you've got kind of these organisations, like the national organisations, they do like a lot of good. They produce a lot of good information. You can go on their website and find out information about all different things, and they'll do some good investigations and some good sort of research and that, and produce that. But like and do all these leaflets. But the thing is, those leaflets are no good unless unless people get those leaflets. They're no good unless they're distributed. No good like producing all this information, producing all these leaflets, if the ordinary public don't get to see them. And who is going to give those leaflets to the ordinary public? That's going to be people in local areas. That's going to be local groups, isn't it? You see, but they don't do anything to kind of like promote local groups, to kind of sort of help with setting up local groups.
Yeah, well, local groups need nurturing and helping, and kind of not guidance, but to kind of facilitate what they want to do in the first place. And so, we don't really have a movement structure that does that very well. We've more got kind of power centers, and and they're competing for the same subscriptions as well. So we've never really resolved this problem of how this movement really caters and develops and facilitates the grassroots very well, in my view.
No, I kind of agree. I mean, I can kind of say my mantra now. I think this is like a kind of suitable time. Because what I always say to people is like, if you're not vegan, become vegan. If you're vegan but not an activist, become an activist. And if you're an activist but not an organizer, become an organizer. Because I think there's often we have got this huge problem of lack of activists. We've got this far more vegans now than we ever had, but the percentage of vegans who are activists is tiny and is far less than go back to when I first became vegan, like in the 70s, through the 70s into the 80s and the 90s. If someone was a vegan, there was a very strong chance that they're also an activist. Like kind of nearly all vegans were also activists. They weren't just vegan in terms of like what they avoided. They were out there trying to campaign for animal rights in some way or another. And that's not the case now. The percentage of vegans who are actually active in spreading the vegan message in campaigning is very, very small. And kind of, we need to change that, because and I find that really hard to understand, because if someone's vegan for the animals, that's, and really vegan for the animals is really the only way you kind of can be vegan, because it is a philosophy of animal liberation. If someone sort of believes in that and wants to avoid involvement in the oppression of other animals, then kind of that's great. But surely, if other people are still oppressing animals, then kind of how does animals are going to carry on being oppressed forever, aren't they? Unless people do something to educate others to become vegan. And so, to me, I don't see why people don't make that extra step, because to me, it's like, isn't that a logical progression? It was for me. I did the two things at the same time.
Somebody like Prince Newman would point again to the structure of the movement, that our movement is designed to kind of get people to subscribe to the national groups, support them, and almost help us to help the animals type attitude. It's not really a DIY culture. It's more, well, we've got a bunch of experts here, you should support them. And so I think that's been the problem. So I think in terms of the structure of our movement, it's deeply counter-revolutionary. It doesn't spread, this kind of cultural revolution very well, because that needs the grassroots to do that. But we don't nurture the grassroots. We maintain the power structures. There's like a power elite in the movement. We're more interested in them than getting all the funds and getting all the resources and getting what's needed to the grassroots level, which is the backbone of the movement. And so it's always been a bit of a puzzle for me. I just don't see why people. Well, I guess it's easier. You send your subscription, then you've done your bit. Perhaps that's what it is.
Yeah, I think that's kind of that's how a lot of people feel. That they'll pay someone else to do it, and they can carry on and watch telly or do whatever thing they're kind of using their spare time to do. Play on their games console and let someone else save the animals. But we all need to be out there. Promoting veganism. That needs to be encouraged. I mean, the active groups, some of the national groups, like for instance, Viva does encourage people to drop their leaflets.
Well,
Animal Aid does.
Will though, Ronnie, because you're providing free labour for their
kind of. Yeah, I mean, yes, that's true. I think that kind of. I don't want to be too cynical about it. I think they do want to. They do want to spread the vegan message, and they want people to do it. But I think the thing is, not enough is done by
they can't deliver them themselves, though, can they, Ronnie? So, like you said before, they need the grassroots.
They need the grassroots.
I mean,
they kind of because they produce this information that is meant to be seen by the public, but the network for distributing of that information is really poor, because the groups aren't there. I mean, this is the thing. It's like in the county where I live, in Worcestershire, where I live. We've only got two active vegan groups, really. We've got our group. We're really, very active, and then there's another group in Malvern that does some stuff. But we've got a few other towns. There's nothing. Nothing happens. And that is really going back to talking about organisers. The reason why nothing happens is because there's no one there organising it. That's why. I think that there are vegans everywhere that kind of would be active if stuff was organised. And when I talk about active, it might only be in a small way, like door dropping or possibly helping at a stall or something like that. But if those things aren't organised, those people won't do stuff. And so this is why organisers are it's so important for people to become organisers. And what tends to happen with vegan activism, it tends to happen in the middle of big cities. In big areas, people do these activities. But a lot of smaller towns, even smaller cities, the suburbs of cities, there isn't anything. There's no outreach. There's no activism. There's nothing. Nobody's spreading the vegan message to people, and that's where we need groups in all these places. And we need people active as individuals in all these places. If someone doesn't want to be involved in a group or there isn't a group,
true. Now here's a challenging question then. I think this would come from someone like Bernie Wright from Dublin, who you know her very well. And so, is it a possibility? And this is kind of would be very frustrating and very depressing, really, that we've actually got as many organisers as we can get, because if you're an organizer, you just get on and you organize things. Whereas we're trying to suggest that we can create more, and so people who are not currently organizing could become organizers if something else or something different happened. Now, that in a sense is that wishful thinking, or is that real? What do you think?
Well, all of us that are organisers, there was a time when we weren't organisers, and we became organisers. We pushed ourselves. We kind of stepped up a level, didn't we? Stepped up to the plate, and we became organisers. So it kind of is possible for people to do that. It's possible for people to just kind of step up a level, and people that are activists. Because what happens is you have these actions happening in the middle of big cities. People come from all around, and they kind of go to the big city and do the action, and that's great. I'm not against those actions. It's brilliant, but a lot of those people, where they actually live, nothing's going on. So what I'd say is maybe don't stop going to the big city if you want to, but what about organising something, where you live, in the town where you live, start organising. Even if there's only two of you, two people, one person can do a lot, or one person door drop.
It's almost like we need a psychologist to tell us why people don't kind of think of that themselves. Almost like, well, why am I travelling, 30 miles into a big city when obviously the same need is in my town or village or whatever, or like you say, do a bit of both. It's just that when it's kind of exclusively. I know that's something to do with the branding, of the groups that you mentioned, and so there is that kind of social element to it, and probably group solidarity. You can think in all those terms, but we really need this kind of we need this initiative to spread out and not just concentrate, because that's been really the problem with the movement. We've got areas of concentration, but we need to move it out and not necessarily make it thinner. But we need to kind of cover more geographical space.
Yeah. It's like with the Animal Liberation Coalition, because I've been looking to invite people from groups, and looking at different towns in England at the moment, because I'm kind of going through it county by county, and it's kind of it sounds great that there's 34 groups involved, but how many towns we've got throughout the UK and throughout Ireland, there's loads, and it's so depressing that town after town after town after town that I look at, no group. Well, there's no active group. There's a group of people that just want to sit around eating cakes. There's no active vegan group, and that part of it is kind of depressing. Do you think, well, there's vegans there, there's vegans everywhere. Why aren't they kind of getting off their asses and doing something? And that's a real big shame.
I wouldn't. I don't criticize the kind of meetups too much, because I think that can be a form of activism. No. It's just it's interesting why it doesn't kind of branch out. I get your frustration there. I think we should probably move on from this one. And
yes, absolutely.
We're getting near the end.
Yes.
Oh,
Uh,
it's like
I recognise someone.
here, isn't it? Motley Crue here.
This is another, one big positive that's come out. I think of the COVID situation, the lockdown, and kind of not just for our movement, but like society in general, and in terms of the environment, is the amount of stuff that could be done online. People that first of all that kind of couldn't be done in the physical world, because like online you can have meetings, and chats with people all over the world. I've taken part in stuff with somebody from USA, somebody from Australia. You'd never be able to meet up in normal circumstances, and yet there you are on Zoom or this one. What's this one, Roger? We're on now. It's StreamYard, isn't it? StreamYard or whatever. Yeah. And you have these meetings and get together, share ideas and stuff. And also, for vegans that are kind of feeling isolated. I mean, you put together something excellent at Christmas. This vegan extravaganza on Christmas Day, 7.5 hours, wasn't it? Of people chatting.
It was 7 hours and about 21 minutes, actually.
7 hours and 21 minutes, yeah. And that was great for like if vegans were like spending Christmas on their own, or they were surrounded by non-vegans, they could kind of find friendship and camaraderie by kind of tuning into that live stream. And that was an absolutely brilliant idea, and something really positive. And I think this is something that can be carried on even when all the COVID's gone and there's no lockdown. This idea of having the online meetings, which we'd never really thought of like properly before. I mean, I'd never been on Zoom before the lockdown. I'd never been on StreamYard. Never done any of these things.
Well, I think it's almost like Zoom and that was a product of the lockdown in a way, because they kind of lifted a lot of their restrictions. I mean, like I think you're only allowed to be on there for about 45 minutes or something. So that kind of there was the lockdown, and there was a lot of technological kind of changes as well as people kind of piling on there. That kind of thing.
Yeah. That's it. So that's a positive thing that's come from it. That can be taken forward. To when we're it's great to meet up physically with people, and but it's not always possible, particularly if there's like long distances involved. And the other thing, is the environment. If you've got people all traveling from everywhere to a meeting, the kind of think of the carbon emissions that are being used with that, whereas they can just get on and kind of have a Zoom meeting. And it's also much easier in terms of time, in terms of money, all these things, so that's something that, that's a positive aspect of it that can be taken forward.
That looks like a cheerful little group in the top left there, doesn't it?
It kind of does. There's a weird bloke on the top left, though. I don't know who that is.
No, I don't know. Some infiltrator, probably.
Yeah, I mean, that's the Animal Rights Show, of course, isn't it? That was from, and that's a good thing. Now, this is another thing that, some people would kind of regard as positive. Lewis Hamilton, because he's... I mean, I don't like the idea of celebrity. I don't like the idea that people are held up as celebrities at all, because why is someone held in such high esteem because they can kick a ball into a net better than someone else, or can drive a car, better than other people, or to me it kind of doesn't make sense. Or sing well. Why is that kind of? Why are they kind of sort of? Why we're so much interest, kind of surrounding them for that. And like, obviously, Lewis Hamilton is one of those people. But I kind of think that if someone is in that situation of being a celebrity, it comes with a duty, because whether we like it or not, people are going to take notice of them. And so celebrities have a duty to be ethical. They've got a duty to kind of, spread the right message, and Lewis Hamilton does. He does. He's vegan. He's vegan. I think he started off becoming vegan for environmental reasons, which probably sounds a bit strange for someone who's a racing driver, but that was the reason. And now he's, he is vegan for the animals for ethical reasons, and he does kind of, spread that message, certainly on social media. And of course, he was, very involved in the Black Lives Matter thing, and kind of, took a stand on that, which was very good. So I think, and he's kind of just been awarded a knighthood, hasn't he? I mean, I hope he refuses it.
Well, funny enough, heretic vegan scum says that celebrity is ruining our society, and I think the issue of celebrity kind of is linked to a lot of the themes that we've talked about today. About not being critical of this kind of celebrity drenched culture kind of thing, and I'm not quite sure whether that even is that connected to a vegan mindset where you want people to think like liberationists rather than kind of follow leaders and follow kind of trends, that kind of stuff. I think in that sense, it kind of goes against the kind of anarchic kind of impulse in me, at least. So
I don't like the celebrity worship at all. It's just that my position is that that's the situation we're in.
And of course, you've got that divide. I mean, most vegan celebrities end up being plant people, really, don't they? So, and again, we're back to that situation where a lot of those people, they didn't call themselves vegan in the first place. I think people like Bill Clinton were in that kind of camp, or Arnold Schwarzenegger. I don't think they called themselves vegan, or they might have just had the label kind of suggested to them or something. But again, we've got this kind of need to kind of have these people as kind of figureheads.
Yes.
In a movement. We're supposed to be a revolutionary movement,
And I think that's all unfortunate. And I think there is a big way in which that prevents people kind of doing things themselves, because they think, oh, these hero celebs will do it all, and I don't have to do anything, So it works against action. It works against people doing their own thing. But it's just that if someone is in the position of being a celebrity, if they kind of find themselves in that position, then they have a duty. They have a duty to kind of to kind of put out an ethical message, because whether we like it or not, people do take notice. And I think
you have to reform your band, Ronnie, and become a celebrity yourself.
That's right. Yeah. So I know. Yeah, we'll have to kind of get on top of the pops, won't we? Or is that not going anymore?
You're asking the wrong person. I don't even have a TV, but there you go.
No, well, I don't. Well, we've got a TV, but I don't watch it. And there was another thing as well. I mean, there was and this is what you were going to want to, but I think you've got a video. You've got a video clip, and I've got to. If you want to play that video clip, Roger, because I've got a.
Okay.
I've got a cat crying outside that I've got to go and see what's happening. So you play the video.
Oh, right. Okay. So yeah. All right. So you're abandoning me now, the other way around. So yeah, let me see if I can get the technology right with this. So I've got to do that, and then we've got to go back in again. Okay. Here we go. Right. So we should have. Hang on a second. I think I've made a mistake there. Share audio. Okay. See if we can get this right. Now this clip is going to bring up some interesting feminist points, which Carl Adams made when she was a guest of the Anne Wright show. Here we go.
In the UK alone, more than 90,000 male dairy calves are shot at birth every year because there is no market for them. Do the right thing. It's dairy.
Okay, are you sorted, Ronnie? The video is just finished. I was saying before we started that it raises an interesting feminist point that Carl Adams made, which is that we do often have a habit in the movement of focusing on male victims of animal oppression. So the kind of the chicks who are ground up in macerators, and the male calves who were shot, and obviously what happens to their mothers is equally bad, if not worse. But again, I don't necessarily think that we neglect that. It's just an interesting point that was kind of made, if you like.
Yeah. I mean, that's just focusing on one aspect. I mean, what happens is, and the example of that video is that's an example of kind of one thing that our group's been doing during the lockdown, and that's advertising on social media. We've probably done about 30 since March, 30 advertising campaigns to promote veganism on social media, and that was one of the videos that we used. And these videos focus on that. I mean, that is only one aspect of animal oppression, like a male calf being dragged off for slaughter. But you kind of, in a very short video, because you've got to use short videos. Long videos, people aren't going to really watch them. And stuff that's not too graphic. I mean, that was kind of sort of heartrending, but it wasn't so graphic that it wasn't sort of blood and guts. And that's the sort of level you need to be at, I think. And
no, even so, I think I apologise. I should have actually issued a trigger warning for that, but
yeah, I mean, it's upsetting, but it's not. I mean, somebody did complain about it, and and Facebook stopped the ad, but I appealed and said, look, it's not graphic. You know, it just shows a calf being dragged into a trailer, and then they allowed it to continue. I mean, our most popular advert was one of a bullock playing with the dog. That was our most popular one, and it was just just a kind of nice image about and just saying to people, well, the dog will be okay, but that bullock is going to go off to be slaughtered, so go vegan. And my kind of point on that is it's kind of disappointed me really that no other group seems to be doing this. This is a really good way of spreading the message, the vegan message, while we're kind of in this lockdown situation, and even when we're not. Is to do these adverts on social media, get people to visit websites, because there's a link connected to the video. There's a button people can press, and they go to a website to learn about veganism. And
so you've been paying for this then, have you, Ronnie?
You have to pay. Oh yes, of course you have to pay. I mean, we do Facebook and Instagram. I mean, it's all Facebook only Instagram. So you can argue with the money's going to Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we've talked about again with the Animal Rights Show is this kind of thing about the vegan bubble and stuff about we need to get outside of that. And of course, what we used to do before the internet, we used to go to the mass media with all the problems. But I mean, do you have kind of stats to say that you are, as it were, getting to non-vegans?
Well, what happens is you get stats as to. I mean, basically, what happens because it took a while. It's a bit complicated to get it all set up, especially if you're advertising, if you're selling something, it's quite easy. If you're promoting what they call a political or social issue, you've got to get authorised, and you've got to kind of either provide a copy. I had to upload a copy of my driving licence, and they had to send a code through the post and all that kind of stuff. To get once you're authorised, it's okay. It's a bit complicated to get set up, and then basically what we kind of worked out was that short videos were the best way of doing it. And if you're advertising on Instagram anyway, you can't have a video longer than a minute, so that restricts you. So videos of a minute or less. And what happens is you set it up so there's like a button, and people are watching the video. There's a button that they can press that says "Learn More," and then that'll take them to a website, which you can choose. You can choose where they go. And so what you get is you get stats on. You kind of get stats on how many people have kind of watched the video. But that kind of be a bit misleading because they only have to watch it for 3 seconds to be registered as someone that watches it. So, but the most important stat is the number of people that have clicked to go on the website. And every ad we run, we get over 100 people, sometimes over 200 people that visit the particular website.
What's the cost then, Ronnie?
Well, that would be that would be 25p to 30 pence per person. Because I mean, you can pay what you want. I mean, you can run an advertising campaign for £5 if you want to, or even £1, whatever, But what we do is we normally do £30, and that's either £15 Instagram, £15 Facebook, or you can do the two together. And it kind of works out on average for each person that visits the website. It works out like 25p to 30p. for each person. And it's kind of, to me, I kind of compare it with delivering leaflets. If you've got a load of leaflets printed for 30 quid and and they had a website address, vegan website on, and you put them through people's doors, and say 100 or 200 of those people actually went to that website, then I think you'd be pretty pleased that you'd had that result. It was that many. So
we're getting a message that there's some interference with your audio at the moment, Ronnie. It's just a little. Yeah, that's it.
Is it my mic's? Yeah. Is that?
It might. I think it's actually. I think it was rustling against your stubble. I think, Ronnie.
Yeah. It probably is. Yeah, if I can't hold it a little away from me.
Now the thing is, we're coming up to 2 hours, so we've got 6 minutes left because I think we ought to finish then. So let me go.
But let me just say about that like I'm kind of disappointed that, because I've said to people, look, I'll show you how to do it. I'll show you how to kind of how you set these ads up, and I'd really kind of no takers on that. And yet this is something that like kind of all groups could do. You have to do it through a Facebook page. You have to have a Facebook page in order to do it. A lot of groups already have got pages, and all right. So you got to raise the money somehow. But if you get a few people who put their hands in their pockets, and it doesn't, like we spend 30 quid, but it doesn't have to be that much, Regan robot from the future.
People are just having a bit of a go, Ronnie.
Oh, that's all right. I'm used to that. I get that with Louise all the time anyway, so I'm used to it. That's nothing. There's nothing compared with her, so it's all right. Yeah. So anyway, so that's another. Well, it's certainly been a positive thing for our group that we started doing it. And it's something that we're going to carry on even after lockdown. We're still going to do that because it is a way of getting out of the vegan bubble. Because like if we, if people share stuff on social media, I suppose if they're new vegans and they've got a lot of non-vegan friends, that's okay, as long as they do it in a careful way where they don't make it so people just switch off.
Yeah.
But if you've been a vegan ages and all your friends are vegan, then you're not gonna. You're not, sharing stuff on social media isn't going to reach anyone who's not vegan. So you have to do something to get out of that bubble, and advertising is a way of doing that.
Okay. Well, we've 4 minutes left, so let's resurrect this one. This is the last slide, folks. You'll be probably pleased to hear, but I think it's an important one in the sense that I've been a bit dismayed that right from the beginning of the pandemic, people have been talking about wishing to get back to normal. And I know we've got this idea about the new normal now, and people have kind of taken that on board. But I remember things like, wedding planners who kind of specialize in taking people to Australia to have a wedding are kind of wanting to get back to doing their own thing. And I remember one. When the first lockdown started, I remember being at the Back into Daylight Animal Sanctuary, and we were talking about how clear the sky was, and that the air was fresher, and there was no kind of jet streams in the air, and also I remember them saying that whales were thriving because there was a lot less traffic in the ocean. So that meant that their sonar was not being disrupted, and that they didn't have to put up with all the noise from the boats and everything, the ships. But getting back to normal is not really where we need to go, is it? And so we've got to be critical of this idea that, wouldn't it be great, vaccine coming, end of the pandemic, let's all get back to normal, because it's normal that's got us into this bloody mess in the first place.
Yeah, it all comes down. Really, it kind of all comes down to human supremacism. The reason we've got the pandemic is for that reason. It's because it comes from the oppression of other animals. This is where the virus comes from. 3 out of 4 viruses are the result of the oppression of other animals. And it's the same. The climate crisis that's originated. That really comes about because of people's repressive attitude to other animals. We wouldn't be in that situation with the climate crisis if it wasn't for that, it was for the sort of kind of selfishness of the human species, or certainly kind of, the people that were in charge. And so, that's the kind of normal we have to change, I think. It's our attitude, the attitude of our species towards other animals needs to change, for the sake of those other animals, but also for the sake of, our own survival. Because what's happened is this has come back to sort of bite us on the arse now, hasn't it? The behaviour of our species towards other animals has come back in these two ways, really, to threaten that, the very survival of our species. And so, so kind of things have to change. Things have to change. And like I said earlier, like some kind of really big changes were made in terms of trying to combat the virus. I mean, I think the changes weren't radical enough and weren't long-lasting enough. And so, haven't been greatly successful because of that. But nevertheless, some big changes were made, particularly in that kind of, really hard early lockdown when all the wildlife seemed to, and so it is possible for us to do that. And we need radical change in terms of combating the climate crisis. We really do, and I'm kind of hoping that lessons will be learned from this, that it is possible to make those sweeping changes, to kind of make the world a better place for other animals and, for our own species.
Indeed. So I think that's a good place probably to finish off. Ronnie, thank you for your company and your words. There is an animal rights show coming up on Monday at 5, folks. So that's the full team, or most of the full team, back together after being swanning off all over the world, ruining the environment on intercontinental flights and everything else.
That's it. Yeah.
Did you have an announcement, Ryan?
I'd just like to wish everyone a happy new year. Let's hope this new year is a better one for our movement than the last one, that we learned from last year. And that, I'd say to people, I would hope that everyone listening to this is at least an activist for veganism, and please consider whether you can be an organizer, because that is, as I said, really vital and really important. And let's hope that this year it's very, very easy to get down about the situation, and it can be very, very depressing. But I think we've got to kind of always think, what can we do about it? How can I do something about this, rather than getting caught in the depression of kind of what's happening? To be thinking of what's the solution? How can I make that solution? How can we go forward? And as I said, let's hope that 2021 is a good year for animal liberation.
Indeed. Now, I was going to give you the opportunity to say your mantra again, but I was going to try and do. I was going to try and do something else first. Hang on a second. See if I can do it. See if I can get the technology right. I've got to stop it. Right. Okay. Here goes. Let's see if we can get this on the go. So, Ronnie, your mantra can be said all over again after this. Go for it. So what's your mantra?
If you're not vegan, go vegan. If you're vegan but not an activist, become an activist. And if you're not an activist but not an organizer, become an organizer.
We'll have to get you a rap. We'll have to get you a rap song with all that on, Ronnie. So
yeah.
yeah, thanks to everybody. Thanks for everybody who's commented and taking part in dialogue. And thanks again, everyone. And we'll see you next time. Animal Rights Show Monday at 5. So bye for now, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Take care.